Hello, people, and welcome back to the Highland podcast. It is currently 3:52 p.m. on a Friday, the 10th of February, 2023. Thanks for joining us again. Much appreciated. It is hosted by yours truly, Caleb, and my co-host, Pete. How are we doing today, Pete? All right?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, mate, pretty good to be fair. Been a nice morning, busy, but glad I've got some shit done. But yeah, so today is episode 25.
26.
26, sorry. Episode 26. Today we're going to be talking about nature, the importance of it, and kind of getting yourself immersed in it, and kind of getting away from the traps of like our advanced species. We'll kind of discuss both ideas and stuff, but that's going to be the theme of today. I hope you guys enjoy, but we'll get stuck in. So yeah, how would you describe nature, Pete?
Well, I think in the context we're talking about the natural world in terms of things not created by humans. So there's a whole argument about is the world we live in now that we've constructed kind of a natural evolution of our progression as a species. But in what we're talking about like the natural world of no concrete, no bricks, no technology, just
everything created by Mother Nature.
Yeah.
So obviously we've experienced huge benefits of kind of leveling up as a species. Mortality rates have gone down, less people in poverty, all these amazing things that humans have done. But to what expense has that been made for? So, although we have these great things happening, we have become a lot more isolated from Mother Nature herself, which seems to have caused, in my opinion anyway, like a lot of problems for a lot of people. It seems like it's really important to get back to nature, kind of just get into a forest or even like a park where you just see a lot of greenery. You're breathing more fresh air, even though I don't know how much of a difference it would be in the freshness of the air if you're kind of in a city, just in a small park, compared to being out in like the Lake District or the Peak Districts where you're just in a mountain range. But it seems to have like a placebo effect anyway if you're kind of in a park, even if it is in a city. These like benefits include like cognition and well-being impacts. So not only are you kind of getting a better sense of well-being by immersing yourself in nature, some studies have like seen that kind of taking breaks from doing uni work or like your normal job and getting out into nature, that helps reset your cognition and improves your ability to focus more, which I thought was quite interesting. It's not just about like the hippie idea of like connecting to Mother Nature because that's where we come from. It can also like benefit you on like a more intellectual level.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of benefits there, I think. So do you want to go through each of the benefits one by one?
Yeah, so what I found was that there's a few like hypotheses. Yes, hypotheses. There's three that I found. There's one called the biophilia hypothesis, which argues that like our ancestors obviously evolved in a wild settings and like relied on the environment for survival. So we kind of have an innate drive to connect with nature. Then there's like a stress reduction hypothesis, which posits that spending time in nature triggers a physiological response that lowers stress levels. And then like a third idea is kind of like attention restoration theory, which holds that like nature replenishes one's cognitive resources, restoring the ability to concentrate and pay attention and stuff. So they're kind of like the overview of benefits. There's also like the more standard benefits of like just getting that sense of like calmness, like kind of a bit of joy, I'd say, for in certain small like amounts. And just that sense of like peace almost, I'd say. But yeah, they're the kind of like main benefits that we see. And then there's other ones that are a bit more specific. Like there was an Australian researchers that asked students to do like a pretty dull attention draining task, and you had to basically like press a certain key when like something showed up on the screen, and then they did half of the people halfway through took a break, and they looked at like a nice piece of scenery where it's like greenery and flowers and stuff for like a minute, and then the other halfway through only looked at like a concrete roof. And as you can expect, the people that looked at like the flowery and like green space had much better results than the people that just looked at a fucking concrete roof. So that's like a specific example, but I think people can kind of get the gist of it, that it's just improves your well-being and your cognition.
Yeah, that's a good summary of all the benefits, I think. What benefits would you say you notice in your own subjective experience when you spend time in nature? What do you notice the most?
I think, well, I don't do it every day, but I like to make a habit of kind of waking up and going for a walk straight away. The main reason for that is because of Andrew Huberman's teachings that you need to kind of get sunlight into your eyes in the morning to help trigger that release of cortisol. Because obviously it's healthier to release that cortisol level earlier in the morning rather than like for it to be released later in the day. So that's like the main reason I go out in the morning. And then I also like to kind of go for walks maybe later in the day as well. And one of the benefits that I always see is, I mean, there's two to be fair. The first one would probably be, I like to kind of listen to music or a podcast, and it's just like the escapism, kind of just getting away from the responsibilities and duties that you kind of have in your day-to-day life, and just being out there in nature helps you just not think about it to an extent. Obviously, if it's like a quite troubling issue, you might be stuck focusing on just that issue, and then there might be some other things you might want to try. But for me, it's just about getting away and just enjoying the simplicities of like walking and breathing and just looking around at like birds flying around, like people walking their dogs. So that's kind of like the first one. And then the second one would be like, when I do want to think about things, it gives you kind of a bit more clarity. So you take yourself out of your situation by escaping to reality, and you can just kind of do that and escape and just have fun. But I think a benefit for myself is also when I'm out there is trying to work through in my mind some issues that I'm facing at the moment. And when you're kind of in nature, there's no like real stimuli from other people to kind of cloud your judgment, I'd say. Obviously there's stimuli from like birds singing and people walking their dogs, but you're not kind of getting, your views aren't kind of getting polluted by other people's opinions because you're just by yourself. So that's kind of the benefits I'd say I see. What about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. You get a lot more, feels as if it definitely helps with mental clarity, just clearing away from the distractions. I think particularly with smartphones and just easy access to as much kind of little dopamine hits of stimulation of new information we have such access to nowadays, I think it's really beneficial for mental clarity to spend time outside, away from all distractions. And other benefits I've noticed myself, I do the same thing with trying to get out in the morning. So if I'm not already going somewhere in the morning, then I will go for a walk to get sunlight in my eyes. And there are certainly an array of like kind of physical and neurological benefits to just spending time in nature, which are very easy to pin down scientifically. Like, for example, getting sunlight in your eyes, that's something that will increase your well-being, and getting sunlight on your skin, getting that vitamin D is good for your health as well. Maybe breathing the fresh air, getting your heart rate up by walking rather than just sitting down, being more active. So there are definitely these kind of obvious physical benefits, but even beyond that, getting into more the mental benefits. So we just spoke about how moving away from distractions of like being on your phone, scrolling social media, which is really easy to do when you just kind of sat around at home. That's kind of removing a dopamine stimulus that takes you away from the present moment almost, and being able to spend time away from that kind of allows your mind to reset. And perhaps that's also what helps with the focus, is simply removing those distractions. Although I do think, there is, so those are a bunch of benefits associated with just spending time away from the distractions. But I also do think there are specific benefits to spending time kind of directly around the natural world, like plants and animals and things.
Yeah.
How do you think it benefits the mind to spending time like near trees and near animals and stuff like that? What do you think the direct effects of that are?
I'm not too sure. Actually, so you kind of discussed like what are the causes of being, what causes being in nature have, what causes the benefits of being in nature? Like you said, is it kind of immersing yourself in the natural world, or is it more so or less so escaping from distractions like technology and other things like that? But to answer your question, like specifically, I think I'll kind of go with that first theory about the biophilia hypothesis, because our ancestors evolved in wild settings. It's something innate in us, and I think it's important that we like identify that, because when I think about maybe more rural tribes or things like that, it seems like there's a common theme between all of them, that they have a real huge appreciation for their history, and there's a huge appreciation for like the traditions that have been passed down through generation and generation. And I think that's something that's in humans, regardless of where you are, like being able to understand where your body came from and what the people that made you, what they were doing, and like so on and so on. I think that's so important. And because so much of our species time has been spent out in the wild, like the wild is like the most impactful tradition that's been constant throughout time. Although obviously in the last few hundred years we've kind of escaped that a little bit by building cities and stuff, it's still like biologically in us to appreciate those traditions, and those traditions are being in nature. So I think that's why it's so like it connects to people on such a deep level. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's a good point. That, but maybe we have like a very fundamental drive inside of us to which our well-being is worse if we don't satisfy, and that's a drive to be out and surrounded by nature. You kind of spoke about acknowledging kind of where you came from, and that being the natural world, and that sounds like it's quite a like process that you're conscious of as you're doing it. You need to kind of think and be more aware of that, whereas there's obviously benefits which just come from simply being out in nature, whether you choose to realize that this is where you come from and to be grateful about that or not. So how much do you think the conscious processes of being aware of kind of this is our roots is beneficial compared to just kind of the subconscious process of just being outside and your body, your mind just enjoying that for no reason that you really have to think about?
Yeah. I think simply just being out in nature will always bring benefits regardless. I think that will bring benefits to like maybe more so your cognition and well-being, but taking the conscious effort to feel that sort of connectedness and actively try and like appreciate the history of like the world and like the species, I think that kind of improves your spirituality maybe more so. Not to say that your spirituality won't get improved, but with just being out in nature in a bit of like an ignorant way, you could argue. It's not like ignorant, but in more of like a naive way maybe. I would say when there is that conscious effort to think about where you are, it does it does have like a more spiritual meaning behind it, and then that's to me, that's something that's really important. Recently, I've kind of started to believe spirituality is something that all humans like kind of need to have a sense of happiness and like contentment with life. It doesn't have to be like a religion or anything, but I do think spirituality is something that all humans would benefit from. And I think that definitely gets improved when you are consciously appreciating nature when you're in it.
Yeah. A kind of another conscious thought process that I think about when I'm in nature, and I think is good for the mind, is realizing that there's a whole world out there. And even I do this sometimes at night. If there's a clear sky, just looking at the sky, you realize like the magnitude of like the world in the universe, that it almost makes you feel less significant as a person, which can actually be kind of free you of a certain burden. Because I think a lot of negative emotion kinds of comes from being overly focused on yourself and almost having an inflated sense of self-importance. You care so much about exactly what happens to you, and care and thinking that every little thing is so significant. Whereas, I think spending time in nature can make you, like, just watching kind of an animal jump around or fly around, like, it makes you kind of think, oh, like, this animal is just living its life the same way I am. It's a completely different species, and we're just living all kind of in this harmonious way.
Yeah.
But
how much do you
not, yeah, go on.
Sorry, how much do you think like the ego plays into that? Because you said it like kind of realizing how small we are compared to the magnitude of the universe almost is freeing, because it shows you how insignificant you are. Do you think like the ego kind of has something to do with that?
Yeah. So I think the word ego can kind of be used interchangeably with like a sense of inflated self-importance.
Right,
That's kind of one definition of what the ego is. And yeah, I think it's difficult because obviously people, just part of life is being self-conscious and thinking about yourself and wanting to improve yourself and improve your life and do the right thing. And not to say that isn't an important process, and that isn't something people should do. However, there is another side to it where I think people can benefit, certainly in terms of freeing themselves of some anxiety and being more grounded and not so swayed by every little emotion in their heads when they spend more time in nature. And like, one of my favorite things to do is on a clear night, just looking up at the stars. I feel like you really get that sense of the bigger picture.
Yeah. It's such a like anti-intuitive thing to think how the acknowledgement of how insignificant you are brings you a lot of freedom. It's a very strange thing that I do agree with you, but it just kind of doesn't make sense in my mind sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle with that idea a little bit, because I do think that people sometimes take it a bit far where they say like, because at the extreme of it, to have that belief that, oh, the universe is so large, we're so meaningless and insignificant, that's like almost akin to nihilism at the extreme. And some people make arguments for nihilism being actually like a good thing, because it frees you of kind of responsibility to fulfill any kind of expectations almost. But and I don't really agree with that. I do think there's a balance to be had, but
I think an argument against that for me anyway would be, although the acknowledgement of how insignificant you are, that could be transferred onto animals as well. Like, if a lion doesn't end up doing anything, it kind of dies, it's not going to change the universe in any significant way, realistically. But we've got to understand that the universe is a compilation of every small thing that happens in it. And although that lion, for example, is a very minute, tiny part of it, that lion still has duties to bring up a family and protect it. Yeah. And humans are exactly the same, although the means by which we do that have kind of evolved over time, especially in the last few hundred years. it's definitely something that humans still have a duty to do. And I think nihilists maybe forget that. And it's not just about kind of just hedonism and just fucking pursuing pleasure. It's about accepting our responsibility, because we are just animals, and it's the responsibility of trying to find a mate and reproducing, and then providing for that offspring so they can do the same. That is like the fundamental duty of humans, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's kind of my problem with the more nihilistic idea of, you know, taking that to the extreme where you say, well, nothing you do matters, when it clearly does if you pay any attention. But you know, I do think there is still value in spending some time at least realizing the magnitude of the world around you and the universe, and almost maybe the main function of that is to kind of lower your ego a bit, lower that overly focus on yourself, and maybe that could even help with your pursuits if you're more focused on kind of acting in the right way rather than just doing whatever's best for yourself and being self-conscious about certain things that don't really matter, when you could be more focused on taking action which does matter, and perhaps, you know, lowering your sense of focus on yourself could actually be beneficial for that.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like a lot of people, well, I don't know how many people, but one could argue like the ego for so many successful people has been a huge part of their success. Like, for example, like Cristiano Ronaldo or like Messi, I don't know them personally, obviously, but they, to me, would probably have huge egos, and that's kind of what has produced the fucking amazing, like, greatest of all time debate between them two. Mm-hmm. But are you kind of saying taking away from that and not focusing on yourself is beneficial?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I do agree with you that your ego and your sense of wanting to achieve something is important, and that's kind of part of the ego. So it is hard to balance those ideas, because it seems as if they're conflicting, and I don't quite know how to untangle that. Have you got any ideas about how they can coexist? How it might be beneficial for you to reduce your focus on yourself, yet still be driven by wanting to achieve things and make the most of yourself and fulfill your potential?
I don't know. It does seem sometimes that they are mutually exclusive, but maybe through, I think through focusing on yourself, you become a higher valued person, and through that, if you can do that, and alongside it, make sure that the outcome of your actions positively impact, or at least don't have any impact on anyone else, then I think that's perfectly fine, and that's a good thing. Like, if you can make sure that you're becoming hyper successful and at the expense of no one else, and hopefully for the benefit of other people, then that's fine. And that is kind of like an egotistical thing, but through simply helping other people as a byproduct of your success, I think it's acceptable.
Yeah, you know, just thinking now, I think maybe it's not as if spending time looking up at the sky and realizing the magnitude of the universe and how small you are in it. Like, I don't think that really takes away from wanting to achieve things that are important to you. Like, you gave the examples of Messi and Ronaldo. If they spent their time doing that every night, I really don't think that would have any negative effect on them in terms of wanting to achieve what's important. But what I think it does do is it allows you to let go of things which trivial bullshit that your mind kind of lingers on and inflates the importance of. So if something's important to you and you want to achieve it, I almost feel like being in awe of nature would kind of enrich your view of the world and your view of life, and would kind of inspire you to make the most of yourself. But what it also does is it allows you to let go of kind of any bullshit that you cling on to. It's like, look, like what this person thinks of me or this little mistake I made in the past. Maybe it kind of retunes you to focus on what is actually important.
Yeah, the act of understanding how insignificant you are compared to the universe makes you kind of want to get rid of the insignificant shit in your life and make sure that everything you are doing is working towards that goal.
Yeah, that seems to be where it meets together and works right. Well. It's just, I think the same thing comes when people talk about kind of coming to terms with the fact that you're going to die and that your life is short. Like, it doesn't take the meaning away from the things that you do. If anything, it makes it more important that you, for example, like, make the most of yourself and fulfill your potential and achieve your goals, because you have a limited time here. But what it does help you do is let go of kind of the bullshit that doesn't matter, because you do have a limited time here. And I think the same way acknowledging death does that, also kind of spending time in nature and really thinking about and just doing things like staring at the sky is pretty beneficial and has the same effect.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, it would be nice to know, like, how many of these successful people are kind of super connected with nature, or are they kind of not? Because, like, you see the likes of, like, Jeff Bezos or, like, Elon Musk or Bill Gates, like, they worked fucking probably like 100 hours a week for fucking years at a time. And that schedule, to me, doesn't necessarily make time to go out in nature and reflect on one's experience in life.
Yeah.
But yet they were still hyper successful. Would you argue maybe through taking that kind of rest and relaxation on a regular basis, maybe they would have been even more effective? Or do you think it would have distracted them a little bit from their pursuits?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say with them, it's like they're very exceptional kind of outlier people who are able to work flat out for their entire waking hours for many, many years on end. And they're just maybe wired in that way. So maybe they're kind of exceptions to the rule. I'd still, I mean, in my opinion, like, I'd still probably say their well-being would definitely benefit if they spent more time in nature. But if they're that extreme about their work, then perhaps for that individual, then taking any time off, is kind of distracting them from their purpose. And their purpose is ultimately what will make their life more meaningful.
Yeah, they're
not sure.
Their life is made up of just being successful. It's not made up of work, family, well-being, physical health. It is solely that their life success is solely measured on the success of their pursuit, rather than these other, like, caveats that are very important for most people in life.
Yeah. Having said that, I do think there's still an argument that they would benefit from spending more time in nature, in terms of, like, obviously you mentioned at the start, the studies showing that it has benefits on your cognitive ability, and the studies on benefits for your creativity as well. So perhaps that it would actually help if they spent more time in nature.
Yeah, because I think there's a story, I think it's in the documentary, but I've not watched it, about Steve Jobs and, like, the beginnings of Apple and stuff. And he obviously is an exceptional fucking character who created, like, the most successful business ever created, maybe. But I think he came up with the idea for Apple, or, like, at least Apple's branding, when he was at, like, an apple farm with his mate, and he was, like, tripping on acid or some shit, or he was doing, like, some sort of psychedelic. And psychedelics is, like, a huge thing when people are on them, apparently, is connecting to nature and, like, having that sense of being one with Mother Nature. So I'm guessing, like, maybe the success of Apple would have never been what it is today unless Steve Jobs was someone that kind of appreciated spending time out and about, away from the distractions of the modern world.
Yeah, I think that's true, and that reminds me. I'm not sure where I read it. It might have been in the book Deep Work, but it was talking about how it was someone like Nietzsche or someone like that who used to spend time like when they wanted to go and focus on their writing, they had like a cabin in the woods or something, and they just spend their time there and basically just write and walk around and think and write, and just like without any distractions, just kind of spending time in nature and working in a focused way.
Yeah,
with all distractions removed. So I think for a lot of people, and maybe writers are amongst the people that it would help the most in terms of having that mental clarity. Yeah, I think it does help with people's work.
Yeah, I think I listened to Cal Newport on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and I think it was Cal that says the author of Deep Work, he was saying, I think he's got a university professor job, but during the summer for like 2, 3, or maybe 4 weeks, he goes out to this cabin out in the middle of fucking nowhere, and he just completely disconnects from the world. And then like Tim Ferriss was saying, he does something like that for like 3 or 4 days at a time. He'll only have like a satellite phone. He'll put on maybe once a day or once every 2 days, and he just completely disconnects from everything to do with technology. I thought that was interesting. But like, how much do you think like temperament and maybe like someone's personality might impact it? Because I know some people that like would often say they fucking hate nature and they'd rather just be inside rather than go for a walk out in a park. Like, do you think temperament may kind of has anything to do with it, or are there maybe other factors that impact someone's desire to get out into nature, maybe like physical health or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of temperament, if we think about that, like looking at the Big Five personality model, I'd say openness would maybe be a key variable. For a more open person would maybe want to spend more time out in nature. Like that would probably stimulate them more because they're just innately more interested in different things, whereas someone less open would just kind of be more happy just like doing normal stuff. They don't need to go out and explore. But I still think it would benefit everyone regardless of their temperament. Maybe for another factor that might affect it is introversion versus extroversion. Someone who's more introverted,
do you think they'd be more likely to enjoy nature? Because I feel like you could argue both.
Yeah, because I was about to say introverted people, you know, because they could be out alone in nature and they'd enjoy that. But even extroverted people, they could be out in nature with other people, and I guess it goes for everyone though. It's spending time in nature with other people is probably one of the best ways you can get social connection. One of the highest quality ways you can spend time with people, going on a hike or something like that. Yeah,
100%. My housemate Jake, he just got back from going to the Lake District and having an Airbnb for 2 nights with like 4 or 5 other lads, and they just went hiking both days, and like he just said it was fucking amazing, which was nice. There's something maybe about. Do you think there's something like you said, it's maybe the highest quality version of social connection? Do you think that could be to do with the fact that you might have more meaningful discussions when you're out in nature? Because when 2 or 3 people are away from the modern world, they kind of maybe feel away from the judgmental eyes and ears of other people, so they're kind of more likely to open up possibly when they're in nature. Or do you think that's kind of a bit abstract?
No, I think that's definitely the case. You've got that factor you just spoke about, like getting rid of this, like not being on your phone or watching TV or distracted by any sort of technology is another factor which could allow for better social connection. And I think, you know, just being out in nature, like we kind of have, as you mentioned, we kind of have a fundamental drive to spend time in nature, and that just kind of boosts everyone's moods. Just being outside, like everyone will just be happier and in a better mood. So that should hopefully lead to higher quality social connection as well.
Yeah, 100%. Talking of social connection, like we kind of came up with a question before the podcast started, like to what extent is our advancement as a species kind of natural? Like I think we can discuss like cities and building up urban areas, like what are the benefits of that and the drawbacks of it. Although there's more people in an area, do people kind of feel less socially connected to them because there is so many people? Like, where do you kind of want to start from there?
Yeah, you mentioned how there's what is it, the Dunbar's number?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's not Callum Dunbar. No, it's not Callum. It's something Dunbar.
It's not Callum Dunbar. No, he went to our school. Shout out if you're listening.
Yeah, so Dunbar was this. I don't actually know what he was. I don't know if he was like a sociologist or something like that, maybe. But he discovered or theorized that there's a magic number for how many people should be in a community for it to kind of thrive and peak. He came up with a number, I think it was 150 people to create a community or like your immediate, maybe like land area or something, I don't know. But 150 people seems to be the magic number from which you can know everybody on a good level, but there's still enough people to kind of bring novelty on a regular basis, I think. I think that's kind of the basis of it. Obviously, most towns and villages will have more than 150 people, especially cities where we've got, I don't know how many cities have over 1 million people nowadays. And those kind of go exactly against Dunbar's number. Do you think, well, okay, so do you want to discuss the benefits first of maybe being in a city or a more built up area with more people?
Yeah. I guess when there's more people, there's a wider pool of people that you're likely to be able to bond with. Whereas if you're in a smaller community, you might end up not being exposed to that many people that you really resonate with. So I guess that's one factor that socially being in a city could benefit you. Do you think there's any benefits of being in the city pure for social reasons?
I don't know if it's a social reason, but like you said, being in a more built up area, you're increasing the pool of individuals to select from. And you mentioned how you can select your friends better, but on a more economic level, you're increasing the number of you're increasing the pool of people you can select from to employ. And the more people you have, the more likely you are to get better talent, I think. I think that's important for businesses, and obviously businesses are created by people, for people usually, and made up of people, so it is like a social thing at the same time. So I think that's one other factor that's kind of important. Another I would maybe say is the fact, like, for example, London. You can do fucking anything in London at any time. Like, there's so much to do all the time. Like, you can just have so much fun in doing new experiences for so long. That's not necessarily something you get in like a town that we're from, where you've only got 50,000 people, I think it is. You can kind of get about and do most things within a short period of time, and then you kind of have to do them again. Not to say that those things aren't like great, but London has such novelty to it. And that new experience just brings like a bit of excitement, I think. Yeah,
it's a blessing and a curse, though, isn't it? Because like an example I can think of how it's a good thing is, for example, there's more access to things. So there's more access to jiu-jitsu gyms in cities. You can get higher quality training, and if there's a local jiu-jitsu gym, that is also a good way of getting social connection and exercise. So that's obviously good. But there's also a lot more opportunity and things to do which would maybe fall into the degenerate category. So more places to drink, more places to party, more places to find some bitches or something. I don't know.
I mean, if you're in, I think maybe the percentages might stay the same, but because you're in a more built up area, there is simply more people that could do you harm. Like, maybe crime is done by, this is just completely fake numbers, but maybe, like, for example, crime might be done by 1% of people. If you're in a town of 1,000 people, that's only 100 people. Wait, 10 people, sorry. That's only 10 people that you're going to maybe bump into to experience harm from. But if you're in London where you've got 10 million people, 1% of that is only it's 100,000 people. I think. So although it's a bigger area, I feel like you're kind of still more likely to experience that harm. Would you agree or would you disagree?
I think there is something about overpopulated areas that breeds crime at even a higher rate, so like a higher percent per person. And I don't know the statistics, but I hope they agree with me. Maybe check that. Don't take my word for it. But
I don't know if I should be looking the maths up on that.
Yeah, I'll let you run a few calculations on that. We'll see what I come out with. Anyway, yeah, but I think, yeah, like it disproportionately encourages amount of crime and its overpopulation. Do you agree?
Yeah, it seems to be that way. Like it's not maybe not publicised enough in the media, but there's obviously more stabbings in fucking per person in London than there probably is in like, I don't know, Sheffield or something, or Nottingham or something.
Yeah.
Although they might be dodgy areas as well, but
yeah,
I think you are right. I think that might have something to do with. I mean, I think maybe two things. It might have something to do with the fact that I think Jordan Peterson was talking about how crime is done not necessarily because you're poor, but it's more so to do with the fact that there's a wider difference between the poorer and the rich. That discrepancy kind of motivates people more the higher it is. I think it was something along the lines of that he was saying, but don't quote me on that. Like, I can't remember exactly. But I also think there may be another reason for the fact that there is a disproportionate amount of crime in bigger cities. It's the fact that they are cities like they don't have that real nature vibe to them. Like, yeah, you can go to maybe Hyde Park or I don't know, another park is it Victoria Park in London or something, or that hill, Primrose Hill. Although you may be getting away from the sound of traffic and stuff like that, you're still kind of getting that smell of the city. You're still getting that like, you can probably still see the city, to be fair, because there's obviously got skyscrapers and stuff, and like you're not able to escape it. And because of that, maybe people's well-being isn't as good as it could be.
Yeah, that's a good point. That links back into kind of why nature would improve people's well-being, and perhaps that has an influence on crime. But yeah, I do like that. I had the same idea actually in terms of it being the inequality, which is greater in cities, because you think about if you have a village of 1,000 people, the richest person, assuming wealth is distributed in kind of a Pareto distribution, where the vast majority of the wealth goes to the top few, and then the vast majority of people have have way less resources, which like this kind of distribution has been shown to be true kind of for all human societies, regardless of political and economics. And the Pareto distribution is quite a fundamental thing, which, coming back to nature, it occurs in nature. It's true for the mass of stars and the mass of planets. It's true for the amount of sunlight, so like trees getting rainforests. It's true for mating
authors and publications.
Yeah, it's true for authors and publications, for mating between for most species. Like, there's a disproportionate amount of success for certain
for the top dominant players.
So it's kind of true. Like, obviously there are exceptions to the rule, and some different things have different distribution, but it is a very widespread rule. But back to the point I was making about that in a village of 1,000 people, like the top 1% there's only so much richer they can be than the poorest people. Whereas when you have millions of people, like the richest person, based on the Pareto distribution, is going to have, it's going to be a much, much bigger amount of inequality between the richest person and the poorest person. So I think that inequality, and perhaps when it's more densely populated, there's more competition over resources. Although, I'm not sure how true that is in a modern day. Maybe because obviously we're not foraging for resources, but there might still be some truth to that.
I think you're right, because like when you think about living situations, there's more like flats and like living like I say, habitats that go upwards, and they house more people than cities. But when you think about businesses, although you can have like a skyscraper where each floor has its own business, businesses take a plot of land usually, and that is kind of based on the land they use, not necessarily like that's like horizontal more so rather than vertical. So you can have a lot more people in a city, and then there still be that same number of jobs, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. That makes sense, actually. Yeah, I've never thought about that.
But yeah, okay. I think I mentioned it earlier, but like, how would you answer the question? To what extent is our advancement as a species natural? Difficult to answer.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I guess, the boring answer is it depends on how you define natural. But is it natural? I think it's a really tough question. Have you got any initial thoughts on that?
I would personally say it is natural, but then I'd kind of correct myself with the example of food. Like, I try and eat like a nice, pretty healthy, natural diet. Obviously, I still eat like refined food and like processed food, but I would argue organic food is natural. Whereas when you get like a chocolate bar, that even if it says it's healthy, it's been processed, so it's unnatural. And I think it's kind of hard when I believe in that. I find it hard to say that humans and the consequences of like being so intellectual and conscious, I don't think we can maybe argue that is natural, because we are creating these habitats and these ways of living that are so based on materialistic like technology and like computers.
Yeah, I'd say it's unnatural for us to be moving away from kind of the way we've evolved to live. And you mentioned there in terms of diet, but yeah, in terms of diet and lifestyle, like we're moving away from the way we originally live. However, there is also, I say it's natural in the sense that as a species, we look to thrive, not just survive and continue, but we look to thrive. We look to push the boundaries of what is possible, particularly as humans. I think that's a natural thing for humans, and I think it is. It's a blessing and a curse because it can have negative effects, but I do ultimately think humans' drive for innovation and improvement is a natural thing, and it's good. However, this brings us into kind of more of a philosophical point about, nature isn't always good. So if we talk about kind of the archetypal mythological way that it's always been represented across history and across different cultures and mythologies, there seems to be common trends that represents nature and culture in kind of this way where they both have a positive and negative element. So you have the positive element of culture, which provides you with stability and resources and opportunity. And then you have the corrupt part of culture, which negatively affects the environment for one, but is also, as I called it there, the corrupt part is vulnerable to corruption and there can be evil within that. But then there's the other side to it where nature can be positive. We spoke about a lot of the positive benefits that it has, that living in peace and harmony with the natural world can have a lot of benefits. But, it's kind of a one-sided argument to not look at the fact that nature is also, it's
force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, it's chaos. Like, so this kind of the difference between order and chaos as kind of fundamental concepts of how we interpret the world. Like, nature is chaos and destruction, and it's dangerous, and it will destroy you if you're out at sea at night. Like, it's not a pleasant place to be. You're just going to be destroyed. It's dangerous. There's things out to get you. It's not this kind of peaceful, harmonious place that a lot of people kind of make it out to be. So it's important when we think about different issues, like how much time should we spend in nature, or even think about environmental issues, that we it's very easy to kind of take up this ideology of believing that nature is purely good and that culture is purely bad. And I also think, despite talking about the benefits of nature in this episode, I think it is important to recognize the benefits of culture and to not kind of be completely against culture and kind of anti society and anti culture, because it does have a lot of benefits in itself.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. Yeah, I think maybe to tweak my answer to that initial question about is our advancements natural, I think, like I said earlier, there is a driving factor in humans to protect our own and kind of provide for them. And it's completely natural for us to do that. And we have done that on such a large scale with the advancements in technology, especially in medicine and stuff. So it's natural for us to do that. It's just, it seems like the means by which we've done that, because they are man-made, they seem so unnatural sometimes. But if we're made by Mother Nature and we make things, is it not Mother Nature that indirectly makes those things?
Yeah, that's definitely an argument, and that's kind of the point I was making earlier about how I believe that it is natural, like, for humans to drive to improve and to create things and innovate, and obviously that can have its downsides, as we kind of see with environmental problems nowadays. But I think it's a bit one-sided to completely neglect, the benefits that pursuit of humans, which kind of in some cases goes against nature. That's not all evil. And yeah, that's what I've got to say about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I've definitely maybe forgotten the extent to which Mother Nature can kind of cause harm to humans as well. Yeah, that's a good point, actually, to consider. Although it seems like most people, especially in the Western world, don't necessarily have to reckon with that force on a regular basis at all, which is good and then kind of bad, because does it kind of make us forget like going back to what you said about looking up at the stars and kind of contemplating your significance in this massive universe? Do you think maybe humans could benefit, like so many people that go wild camping and stuff and go hunting, could benefit from going out in nature and simply like viewing or like being aware of how vulnerable they are to nature?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a benefit of nature. I remember hearing Joe Rogan talk about how, like, after he's gone on a hunting trip or something and he's been out in the cold and wet for, I don't know how long he goes for, like a week, and he's just been really tired from hiking around all day, and he, like, when he finally does get home and goes for like a warm shower and stuff like that, it's like you're infinitely more grateful for the things that you have, because of technological advancements that make our life a lot more comfortable. But it's probably important to spend time in discomfort, kind of confronting the suffering of the natural world, so to speak. And maybe one way of doing that is just through cold exposure. Like, it's like back in the day, there was no warm water apart from fucking like near volcanoes and shit. So
yeah, fucking hell. Yeah, it's mad how
I mean, in hot parts of the world there's warm water, but
true, yeah.
Water is usually pretty cold, especially where we are.
Well, especially the sea's always cold.
Yeah,
at least it isn't. This might be a stupid question, but I know in like really, really hot countries, the sea doesn't necessarily feel cold because your body's so hot. Does the sea get warmed up a little bit, or is it still
the sea? Yeah, the sea is quite warm in some places. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, a bit of a tangent there.
Yeah. So we were going to go on to discuss maybe what our future projections of how we'll interact with nature maybe would look like. You mentioned before the episode something about AI and how maybe they could simulate something or something along those lines. Do you want to kind of discuss that and explore it?
Yeah. To be fair, I hadn't thought about it too much. Just kind of an idea. In terms of the future of like the world, like it does seem, there are like a lot of people are really concerned about the environment right now, and I think that will probably lead us to innovating in a way which helps preserve the environment. Like I'm pretty sure in like Europe there are more trees in Europe than there were like 50 or 100 years ago or something.
Yeah, I think Germany has fucking loads of trees now.
Yeah, so as we're developing more, we are actually, and we're looking into like renewable energy and stuff. And then obviously when we run out of fossil fuels and stuff, we will have to make a full switch to renewable energy. So I am optimistic about the state of the environment, because it's a big issue that kind of the whole world is wanting to, there are obviously people who are slow to get on trying to protect the environment. Some people don't really believe in it, but as a whole, I think the environment should. I'm optimistic that the environment will be preserved well.
When you talk about when there's like a discussion about climate change, it like there's always that word about preserving the world and preserving the environment. And then like, when I thought about it just then, it's a little bit self-serving, because realistically, in my view anyway, the world will always be preserved because it is its own organism that can like heat up and cool down like in cycles over time. And when humans talk about preserving the world, they're realistically only talking about preserving the world for themselves. Like all these natural like climate disasters that are being forecast, maybe rightly or wrongly, or falsely or truthfully, they are more so just like concerned with how humans can survive in that like projected like model, and it's not necessarily, they don't necessarily take into the fact that I think eventually humans on Earth anyway as a species will probably like die out, maybe due to natural causes or human causes, but we will eventually die out, and like that's just something that is completely fine in my mind because the Earth will still be there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying in terms of like the world is a big fucking rock floating around. Like no matter what we do, the Earth is still going to be there.
Yeah,
but I will push back a little bit, because like it's not purely self-serving, the drive to keep the environment in a good state, because obviously it's for animals and
true
and stuff as well. Like you don't want to destroy the natural environment for them or change the climate so much that the animals die. So it's definitely not purely self-serving. And I do think a lot of these people who are concerned about climate do come from a genuine place, but there's a balance to be had, and and kind of looking into the future, I mean, it does seem, so I've said that I think the environment will be preserved. It seems like we're going in that direction, but we'll see how that plays out though. But beyond that, like technology is advancing, and a lot of the things we spoke about is the benefits of nature getting away from distractions and things like that. And with like people, it doesn't seem like people are spending any less times on their phone, for example. It seems like that's something that's going up, and there's always more entertainment. And with new VR technology being developed, perhaps people will completely decide to go into the matrix, so to speak. So I guess that's a possibility, but I'm not sure exactly how that relates to nature. I guess there'll be more reason to not spend time in nature because people will have more stimulating things to do, and I guess that's a problem we face now, as we will maybe even more so in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you mentioned AI, I think I don't know to what extent AI will be able to solve all the world's problems, but in my mind, it seems like if AIs can continuously learn at an exponentially faster rate than humans, then like they will be able to solve a lot of the more simpler problems in the world, although they're still quite monumental if they're on a global scale. I feel like AI will inform humans on like how best to make the next steps for the future. Like in terms of buildings and stuff, like there's buildings that like are just skyscrapers, are literally just glass boxes, but some architects around the world are like kind of getting into this, are kind of exploring the idea and like actually creating buildings where they have like gardens in them and like more so revolved around incorporating Mother Nature into these man-made structures. And I think AI will probably push that because AI will show us the data on how it like helps with cognition, helps people work better, be more efficient and stuff, and then it also helps their well-being. But I think, like you did say, there is a risk of humans kind of giving into their urges and just purely focusing on the stimulation of technology. Although AI, I don't know if AI becomes. I think AI will be able to solve these problems, but it just depends on whether AI will have the authority to implement these problems by itself, or will it need to always have human approval? Because humans might not want to give that approval because they want to give into those urges. Whereas if AI is its own self autonomous, if AI is its own autonomous being, it might force humans to like use technology less and go out into nature more. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. You know, we should do a whole episode about prospects of the effects of AI in the future. Yeah,
I think that'd be a good idea, actually.
Yeah, and on that note, I feel like we've covered probably everything we wanted to today.
Yeah, I think so too. Interesting podcast. I'll definitely try and get out for a few more walks this week.
It makes me think I definitely don't spend enough time in nature. But
yeah, it's kind of so far away sometimes, even though it might only be a 10-minute walk, but to the nearest park or whatever. But worth making the journey, I think.
Yeah, maybe just taking the scenic route into uni or something.
Yeah,
probably goes a long way.
Yeah, good point actually. Well, thank you guys for listening. Please check us out on Spotify if you want to listen on the go. Although you probably already listened to the episode if you're listening now, unless you're viewing it on YouTube with the next episodes.
Yeah. All our episodes
Spotify,
are on there.
YouTube, you know the drill. Please like and subscribe if you don't mind. Be appreciated. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. I'll see you all in a bit.